The wind howls across the barren steppes of Mongolia, where a figure stands alone, silhouetted against the fading sun, a warrior whose name would carve its way into the pages of history, Genghis Khan. But what if I told you that the tale we know is only half true? What if, beneath the surface of the man who conquered continents, there was a deeper story, one of ambition, betrayal, and a thirst for vengeance that even history struggled to fully capture? This is not just the story of a conqueror, but a man who was shaped by the shadows of his past, whose rise to power was anything but inevitable. Let's uncover the truth behind the legend. Before he became the name whispered across battlefields, before the great Mongol Empire stretched its fingers from Asia to Europe, there was only a boy named Temüjin, born into a fractured world of clans and shifting allegiances. Temüjin's path was never one of glory, but of survival. In the heart of the Mongolian steppes, where every clan was an island unto itself, power wasn't handed out freely. It was earned, and often with blood. Temüjin's early life was one of hardship. His father, Yesugei, was poisoned by a rival tribe, leaving the young boy and his family vulnerable to attack. Temüjin's clan, the Borjigin, fell into disarray, and his mother, Holun, was left to raise her children in a world that saw them as weak. But Temüjin wasn't weak. From the moment he could hold a bow, he was determined to survive and prove himself. The first significant step toward his rise came when he escaped captivity, a bold act that defied the norms of his society. He didn't return home like many would expect. Instead, he set out to create his own destiny, gathering a small band of loyal followers. These men, few in number but fierce in their loyalty, would become the core of his army. They were not the strongest, nor the wealthiest, but they shared one thing in common. They trusted Temüjin, and trust, in a world filled with betrayal, was worth more than gold. But as Temüjin would soon learn, trust alone wouldn't be enough. His enemies were not just other tribes, but the very forces of nature itself. Drought, famine, and the unforgiving wilderness that could turn even the most powerful man into a beggar overnight. Temüjin's path would be a long one, filled with battles and betrayals, but each step he took brought him closer to his goal. And with every victory, the legend of Genghis Khan began to take shape. The question remained, would his ambition outpace his ability to control it? And what sacrifices would he have to make along the way? The bitter winds of the Mongolian steppes cut through the night as Temüjin sat alone, his mind racing with visions of what could be. The tribal feuds that had fractured the Mongol people for centuries still raged on, and Temüjin knew that to create a unified empire, he had to face something far more formidable than any rival clan. He had to confront the deeply ingrained culture of division that ran through the veins of his people. Temüjin wasn't born with the luxury of a strong alliance or powerful backing. His family was poor, and his position was weak. Yet he understood, something others didn't, that greatest threat to the Mongol people was not a rival tribe, but their inability to unite. He knew that unity could bring them strength, and strength could bring them victory. But the question was, how could he turn scattered tribes, each with its own customs and loyalties, into a single cohesive force? The answer came when Temüjin's family, along with a handful of loyal followers, were forced to flee after the betrayal of a powerful Mongol leader. This was the breaking point. For Temüjin, the suffering of his people wasn't just a battle to survive, it was a battle for justice. His experiences with betrayal left a scar that would never heal, but they also fueled his desire for revenge. He would build an army not just out of warriors, but out of men who were also driven by a sense of injustice. He began by creating a new type of loyalty, one that transcended tribal affiliation. Instead of relying on traditional bloodlines and alliances, Temüjin forged bonds based on merit and respect. The old ways, in which loyalty was inherited through family ties, were replaced by loyalty based on ability and personal achievement. This was an unorthodox and dangerous move, but it worked. Men from all tribes, even those who had once been his enemies, began to join his ranks. They came for power, for revenge, and for a chance at something greater than the cycle of bloodshed and betrayal they had always known. But Temüjin's vision wasn't just about winning battles, it was about winning hearts. He implemented strict codes of conduct among his warriors. Stealing from the tribe was forbidden, and discipline was paramount. In battle, he led from the front, inspiring his men with his courage and unwavering resolve. He became not just a leader, but a symbol of the unity he sought to create. His army, though small in number, was becoming a force to be reckoned with, and his reputation began to spread far beyond the steppes. It was around this time that Temüjin faced one of his most dangerous challenges. His former blood brother, Genghis Khan, once a close companion, Jamukha had become Temujin's bitter rival. The two had fought side by side in their youth, but differences in leadership and ideology tore them apart. Jamukha was a traditionalist, believing in the old ways of Mongol rule, where loyalty to one's tribe and bloodline was the highest virtue. Temujin, on the other hand, was more radical. He believed that a strong Mongol empire could only be built on merit, loyalty to the leader, and discipline. Their rivalry came to a head in a bloody confrontation, where Temujin's forces clashed with Jamukha's. The battle was brutal, with hundreds of warriors falling on both sides. Temujin's army, although outnumbered, was victorious, thanks to their loyalty and discipline. However, this victory came at a heavy price. Jamukha's defeat marked the end of their bond, and the consequences of that fracture would be felt for years to come. Temujin's victory over Jamukha was significant, but it wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a symbolic one, showing the Mongol tribes that a new way was possible, that unity, discipline, and merit could create an empire that surpassed anything the world had ever seen. The battle had shown the Mongols that change was inevitable, and that Temujin was the man to lead them into a new era. But as Temujin continued to build his power, he faced even greater challenges. The question was no longer whether he could defeat his enemies. It was whether he could keep the growing empire united and hold his followers together in the face of temptation, betrayal, and internal strife. Temujin's ambition was limitless, but the true test would come when the temptation of absolute power threatened to undo everything he had worked for. Would his vision for the Mongol Empire survive? Or would the very forces he had united begin to tear it apart from within? Temujin had spent years forging alliances, uniting the Mongol tribes under his banner, and creating a disciplined, unstoppable force. But as he looked out across the endless steppes, he knew that the future of his people lay beyond their tribal lands. His ambition wasn't just to lead the Mongols, his ambition was to. The question now was how far he was willing to go to achieve this vision. After his victory over Jamukha, Temujin's power grew exponentially. The Mongol tribes that had once viewed him as a mere upstart now saw him as their true Khan, their leader, their emperor. But with power came enemies, and as his reputation spread across the steppes, so did the threats. Temujin knew that the world beyond Mongolia was a far more dangerous place. The vast empires to the west, the Khwarezmian Empire, the Jin dynasty, and the Western Xia were more sophisticated, wealthier, and more powerful than the Mongols had ever known. Yet Temujin was no stranger to risk. He knew that to truly unite the Mongol people, he would need to secure not only their loyalty but also the resources and the territories that would ensure the survival of the empire. He began his conquest with a sense of unwavering determination. It wasn't just about military victory, it was about changing the world order, and the first step was to establish Mongol dominance over the greater Central Asia region. Temujin's first major campaign was aimed at the Western Xia dynasty, a powerful state to the west of Mongolia. The Western Xia had been a thorn in the Mongol side for years, and Temujin had long harbored a deep-seated grudge against them. His father's death had been partly due to their treachery, and now Temujin was determined to avenge it. The campaign was swift and brutal. The Mongol forces, equipped with superior tactics, cavalry, and archery, overwhelmed the Western Xia's defenses. Temujin's army decimated their cities, forcing the remaining rulers to bow before him. But this victory, while significant, was only the beginning. Temujin knew that his real challenge lay ahead. To secure his legacy, he had to go further, to take on the mightiest of empires, and prove that the Mongols were not just a tribe, they were a force to be reckoned with. The campaign was swift and brutal. The Mongol forces, equipped with superior tactics, cavalry, and archery, overwhelmed the Western Xia's defenses. Temujin's army decimated their cities, forcing the remaining rulers to bow before him. But this victory, while significant, was only the beginning. Temujin knew that his real challenge lay ahead. To secure his legacy, he had to go further, to take on the mightiest of empires, and prove that the Mongols were not just a tribe, they were a force to be reckoned with. The next target was the Jin dynasty, one of the most powerful empires in China at the time. Unlike the Western Xia, the Jin dynasty was a formidable opponent with a well-organized military and a wealth of resources. The Jin were not easily intimidated, and many saw them as an impenetrable fortress. But Temujin was no ordinary leader. His strategy was to strike fast and hard, never giving his enemies a chance to regroup or retaliate. Using his exceptional knowledge of terrain and unconventional warfare tactics, Temujin's army relentlessly attacked the Jin's weakest points. The next target was the Jin dynasty, one of the most powerful empires in China at the time. Unlike the Western Xia, the Jin dynasty was a formidable opponent with a well-organized military and a wealth of resources. The Jin were not easily intimidated, and many saw them as an impenetrable fortress. But Temüjin was no ordinary leader. His strategy was to strike fast and hard, never giving his enemies a chance to regroup or retaliate. Using his exceptional knowledge of terrain and unconventional warfare tactics, Temüjin's army relentlessly attacked the Jin's weakest points. For months, the Jin dynasty was under siege. Temüjin's forces destroyed their supply lines, cut off their communications, and struck at their heartland. Slowly but surely, the Jin dynasty began to crumble. Temüjin, not content with just military victory, knew that to truly break the Jin's spirit, he had to use their own strengths against them. He began to employ psychological warfare, spreading fear and doubt among their ranks. As the Jin forces struggled to hold their ground, many defected, joining Temüjin's cause in search of a better future. The Jin dynasty's collapse was inevitable. Temüjin's victory was not just a military triumph, it was a testament to his tactical genius and relentless drive. His empire was now on the brink of becoming a global superpower. The Mongol Empire, once a scattered collection of warring tribes, was beginning to coalesce into a massive force that would soon stretch from the steppes of Mongolia to the gates of China. However, Temüjin's success came at a cost. The further his empire expanded, the more difficult it became to maintain control over his growing territories. As his reach grew, so did the challenges of holding it all together. The Mongol Empire was vast, and its people came from a multitude of cultures, traditions, and histories. The friction between these cultures threatened to unravel the very fabric of the empire. In the face of this, Temüjin was forced to make difficult decisions. His empire was built on the foundation of unity, but now that unity was being tested, the question arose: could Temüjin maintain control over the empire he had created, or would the weight of its vastness and the diverse nature of its peoples cause it to implode from within?